From worries that his life had been ruined by Disney, to excitement for the next steps of his career with the DC Universe, here's how James Gunn explained how being fired from Marvel catapulted his career. It turns out losing your job in the MCU isn't so different from losing your job anywhere else. In interviews over the years, the Guardians of the Galaxy director opened up about how he felt after being fired from his dream job. He described feeling like everything was gone and that he couldn't believe it. He was afraid that without an income, he'd have to sell his house. His anxiety went even further, and he was worried that he'd never be able to work again. As you can imagine, there was a lot of resentment, as he felt like everything he'd worked so hard for and everything he'd built at Marvel was being ripped away from him. Those fears were put to rest pretty quickly, as Gunn wasn't a free agent for too long before Warner Brothers gave him a newer, bigger, and better job. Still, Gunn was left feeling burned by what happened. Now that he's not worried about where his money is going to be coming from, the big question is how he feels about what happened in hindsight. But first, a quick recap of how he got fired from the MCU in the first place. In 2018, James had established himself as one of the top talents in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, coming hot off the heels of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. At this point, he was consulting on every Marvel movie and had a great working relationship with the man with the plan, Kevin Feige. Speaking of Kev, he was so impressed with what Gunn was bringing to the table. He was in talks with him about expanding his role in the MCU. The idea was that he'd hand the entire Marvel cosmos to the hotshot director, which would take a load off Feige's back while putting the Marvel Galaxy in hands he could trust. But the hotshot happens to love going off on Twitter. And though tweeting about politics in 2018 was a dangerous game, Gunn decided to criticize President Donald Trump on the platform. That attracted the rage of conservative Twitter, and Mike Cernovich, a commentator, went on a deep dive through James's feed, digging up some terrible, edgy tweets that he'd posted over a decade ago. Though Gunn had apologized for those tweets before, the outrage from others was fierce, and Disney wasted very little time in firing him, ignoring the pleas of the Guardians cast and Feige himself. After everything that happened with Disney, Gunn's been an absolute saint to these old bosses, agreeing to come back and finish his Guardians story when the exec who fired him asked a year later. In interviews, it sounds like he found the silver lining in his situation, going so far as to say that the firing made him feel love for the first time. That love coming from Jennifer Holland, his then girlfriend and now wife, as well as Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, and Karen Gillan. That experience reminded him why he started making movies in the first place, which he'd lost sight of when he was part of the Marvel machine. He isn't mad at the people who canceled him, nor does he feel like a victim of cancel culture, since he knows that he can draw a line between himself and people like Harvey Weinstein. Though he did compare Twitter to the paparazzi, at the end of the day, he acknowledged that cancel culture can bring accountability, and it can bring pain. But as long as it's wielded against the right people, Gunn isn't too bothered about it. Honestly, I wouldn't be mad about going through this situation either, because Warner Brothers has given him way more to do than Disney did. Like I said before, Gunn wasn't between jobs for very long, and the Watchtower couldn't move fast enough to poach Marvel's best director. Before long, he was given the chance to make The Suicide Squad, a new take on the concept that David Ayer dragged through the mud with his movie. While it has the essence of a Gunn project, The Suicide Squad was its own thing, and the director took full advantage of the dark concept and characters, not to mention that R rating, to deliver a movie that was violently entertaining. It was also a box office success for the DC Extended Universe, especially when stacked up against other R-rated films. At that point, Gunn had gained so much trust from the suits that when he knocked out the scripts for Peacemaker during lockdown, the show was given the green light, no questions asked. Wouldn't you know it that the show was another highlight of the DC movie franchise? Gunn's success with DC projects didn't go unnoticed by the new management after the merger, and he's now gained the ultimate power. The DCEU's curtains are closing, and the franchise is gearing up for a new take on the cinematic universe concept, with none other than James Gunn in the driver's seat. He announced the first set of movies and shows in January 2023, calling it Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters, and it's got DC fans positively raving. The DC Universe is officially taking flight when Superman Legacy comes out in 2025. Other projects in this slate include a Batman movie featuring Damian Wayne as Robin, the first big-screen Supergirl outing, and movies for The Authority and Swamp Thing, which would have been hard to imagine for the biggest fans of those titles. On the small screen, the director will continue the Peacemaker story, with the series Waller being a similar energy to the animated Creature Commandos. Take a crack at the Green Lantern franchise with Lanterns, explore the backstory of Wonder Woman's home island in Paradise Lost, and he's also doing a Booster Gold show, which is another pleasant surprise. It's an ambitious slate of projects, unlike the previous cinematic universe, which gave us Superman and the Justice League in just the first 4 years. Gunn's time working out his DC universe hasn't been totally smooth sailing, as he's constantly dealing with rumors and false leaks. Worse than all that, he's started angering some corners of Twitter again. Heavy is the head that wears the crown, and the new head of DC Studios has had to make decisions that have annoyed fans of the DCEU. One of the biggest changes he made was to recast Superman, and he did it just as Henry Cavill had made his grand return to the role in the post-credits scene of Black Adam. Cavill isn't the only popular cast member being thrown out. Gunn's recasting almost the entire franchise, and that means no more Jason Momoa as Aquaman or Dwayne Johnson's Black Adam. The fates of other characters like Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman or Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn are still in the air. This scorched earth approach would be more than enough to get James canceled again, but people are also angry about the actors he's keeping around, which is basically the entire cast of Peacemaker. He's been accused of favoritism because of his working relationship with that cast, and because his wife happens to be a major character in that show. But I wouldn't want Gunn's fans to worry, because he sounds pretty happy at his new job. When he first got to writing The Suicide Squad, Gunn told interviewers that he was having the most fun writing that script since Dawn of the Dead, one of his earliest writing jobs. Now that he's in charge of the entire franchise, he hasn't let that go to his head. In every interview where he talks about what he's up to, he seems very excited about everything, which is refreshing to see. These days, he's mostly hard at work hammering out Superman Legacy, which is a passion project for him. But unlike a lot of Marvel and DC fans, who often go for each other's throats, James doesn't see himself as a rival to the MCU. Bad superhero movies are bad for both camps, so his hope is that Kevin does a good job on his end, while he plans to pull out all the stops in competing with him, and the only winner will be superhero movie fans. One thing that's clear from watching him and Feige doing promo for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is that they're still friends, and that's never going to change. If you're a fan of superhero movies, there were some dark times, but there's some real excitement on the horizon. So, from his excitement to be working with Superman and other DC characters, to the fear and anxiety he felt when Disney fired him, that was what James Gunn said about how being fired from Marvel catapulted his career.